Story 1. The Hitchhiker in the Rain. The storm came suddenly, like the sky had split open in one violent shudder. The kind of rain that turns roads into rivers and headlights into dim glows swallowed by the black. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter, leaning forward as if it would help him see through the sheets of water slamming against his windshield. His wipers swiped back and forth furiously, but they were useless. The world beyond the glass was a blur of gray and silver streaks. He was 30 miles outside of town, on a two-lane country highway that cut through nothing but farmland and dense patches of woods. The storm had knocked out his cell service half an hour ago. His GPS had frozen, but he'd driven this stretch before, or at least he thought he had. Everything looked different in the storm. Lightning forked across the sky, bright enough to illuminate the endless road ahead, and something else. A figure. Daniel squinted, his heart giving a startled jump. There, on the shoulder of the road, stood a person, a lone hitchhiker. The figure was drenched, unmoving, head bowed as if the rain itself were pressing them into the earth. A backpack hung from one narrow shoulder, sagging with water. Daniel's first instinct was pity. Whoever they were, they must have been out there for hours. But pity was quickly followed by unease. Who the hell would be walking this road at midnight, in a storm like this? He debated for several seconds. Keep driving. That was the logical answer. It wasn't safe. He'd heard stories, hitchhikers who weren't really stranded travelers, but criminals waiting for some good Samaritan to pull over. But then lightning cracked again, and he got a better look. The hitchhiker wasn't holding a sign or waving. They weren't even trying to flag him down. They just stood there, still as stone, head lowered, water dripping from their hair like melted wax. Something about that unnatural stillness gnawed at him. Daniel slowed the car. The voice in his head screamed at him not to, but his foot betrayed him. The tires hissed across wet pavement until he rolled to a stop just a few feet ahead of the figure. He lowered the passenger window a crack. Cold rain misted inside. "You need a ride?" he called out. The figure didn't answer. Lightning again. This time he saw their face. A young woman, pale, lips bluish from cold. Her eyes, dark and unblinking, stared directly into his. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. He unlocked the door without meaning to. The woman opened it slowly, almost mechanically, and slid into the passenger seat. She smelled faintly of wet earth. Not mud or rain exactly, but soil, like freshly dug ground. Daniel forced a nervous smile. Hell of a night to be walking. She said nothing. Her wet clothes clung to her thin frame. She didn't shiver, didn't rub her arms for warmth. She just sat rigid, water dripping onto his seat. "Where you headed?" Daniel asked. Her voice, when it finally came, was soft. Too soft, like the rain outside swallowed it before it reached him. "Home." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, sure." "Where's that?" Her eyes slid toward him, slow and deliberate. "You'll see." The silence after was suffocating. Only the slap of the wipers and the roar of the storm filled the space. He tried not to look at her, but it was impossible not to notice the details. Her fingernails were caked with dirt. Her backpack, now slumped at her feet, looked wrong. Not like a traveler's pack. Too old. Too heavy. Daniel cleared his throat. "Name's Daniel. You." Her head tilted slightly. "Do names matter?" He didn't answer. The road stretched on endlessly, swallowed by rain and darkness. He couldn't remember the last turn he'd taken. Hadn't he passed this stretch before? Those same leaning fence posts, those same twisted trees. He glanced at the rearview mirror. For a split second, just a blink. He swore he saw her reflection sitting not in the passenger seat, but directly behind him, staring over his shoulder. His grip tightened on the wheel. When he looked again, she was in her seat, exactly where she'd been. "You okay?" he asked, voice cracking. She turned her head toward him fully now. Her wet hair clung to her cheeks like vines. "You should never stop," she whispered. "Not out here." Daniel's throat went dry. The storm raged on. Time seemed wrong. Daniel swallowed hard. Almost where? Her lips curved upward, but it wasn't a smile. Too stiff. Too sharp. Home. Lightning exploded across the sky, bleaching the world white for an instant. And in that flash, Daniel saw it. Up ahead, On the side of the road, another figure, standing in the rain. Head bowed, still as stone. Exactly like her. His stomach lurched. He slammed on the brakes. The car skidded, tires screeching across slick asphalt, stopping just feet away from the second figure. Daniel's breath came in shallow gasps. The figure outside raised its head. It was the same woman, the same face. Daniel whipped his head toward the passenger seat. Empty. The door was still closed. The seat soaked, rainwater pooled in the fabric. But she was gone. He looked back outside. The figure, both figures now, stood side by side, watching him. Two identical women. Lightning again. Now 3. Another flash. 4. They lined the roadside, each one identical, each one staring with those dark, hollow eyes. Daniel fumbled with the gear shift, slamming it into reverse, tires spinning as he tried to back away. But the road behind him was gone. He swore it. The asphalt had dissolved into a black expanse of water stretching endlessly behind. His headlights flickered. The wipers screeched once, then stopped mid-swipe. The storm was gone. Silence. Daniel's hands shook violently. The figures stood closer now, surrounding the car. Their faces pressed against the glass, hair dripping, dirt-streaked fingers scraping slowly along the windows. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Then, a whisper, right beside his ear, though the seat was empty. "You shouldn't have stopped." The last thing Daniel saw was the passenger door handle twitching, lifting on its own. The car filled with the stench of earth. Wet soil. Grave soil. Darkness swallowed him whole. Story 2. The basement flood. The rain began at dusk, slow and steady, pattering against the windows of the old farmhouse. By nightfall, it had grown into a deluge. Sheets of water poured from the black sky, hammering the roof like fists. The gutters overflowed, streams snaking down the siding in glistening rivulets. Inside, Emma lit another candle. The storm had knocked out the power half an hour ago, leaving the house swallowed in a heavy, wavering darkness. She and her husband, Mark, sat in the living room with blankets wrapped around their shoulders, the air damp and cool. "Think it'll let up soon?" Emma asked, staring at the dancing flame. Mark shrugged, leaning forward to peer out the window. Beyond the glass was only distortion, rain, fog, and the faint outline of the barn in the distance. Forecast said heavy showers all night. Looks worse than that, though. Another clap of thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the walls. Emma flinched. The farmhouse was nearly a century old, passed down through her family. It groaned in storms, timbers expanding and shifting as though the house itself felt every strike of lightning. Then they heard it. A faint drip, drip, drip. Emma froze. "Please tell me that's not." Mark was already standing, candle in hand. He followed the sound toward the kitchen, then stopped at the narrow door beside the fridge, the one leading to the basement. The dripping was louder here. Emma joined him reluctantly. The storm outside roared, but underneath, there was something else. A faint sloshing. Mark frowned. "I'll check it out." Emma grabbed his arm. "Wait. Don't you hear that?" He nodded. "Yeah, probably a little water got in through the window well. Happens with storms like this." She didn't answer, only tightened her grip. But he pulled away, opening the basement door. A wave of damp air rolled up the stairs, heavy with the smell of wet concrete and something else. Metallic. Earthy. They descended carefully, candlelight flickering across the walls. The steps creaked underfoot. At the bottom, Emma's heart sank. Water spread across the concrete floor, already a few inches deep. Cardboard boxes sagged, their contents soaking through. Old photo albums, winter clothes, Christmas decorations, all ruined. "Damn it," Mark muttered, setting the candle on a shelf. "We'll have to move what we can." Emma crouched, dipping her hand into the water. It was ice cold. Too cold. She shivered. "This doesn't make sense. It hasn't been raining long enough for this much flooding." Mark didn't answer. He lifted a box onto a higher shelf, water dripping from the soggy bottom. The drip, drip, drip continued, though neither could see from where. The basement windows were dry, sealed shut. The water seemed to be rising from the floor itself. Emma's chest tightened. "Mark, it's higher already." He looked down. She was right. In just the time they'd been down there, the water had crept up to their ankles. "That's impossible," he whispered. The candle sputtered as though the air itself was heavy with moisture. Then Emma saw it. A ripple, not from their movements, but from the center of the room. Something disturbed the water, creating slow, deliberate circles that spread outward. She grabbed Mark's arm. "Did you see that?" "Probably a pipe burst," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The water surged suddenly, rising another inch in seconds. Both of them backed toward the stairs. That was when the basement door slammed shut above them. The sound was violent, final. Emma screamed, racing up the steps and throwing her shoulder against the door. It didn't budge. The knob wouldn't turn. "Mark," she cried. He shoved against it too, but it was as though something held it from the other side. The water continued rising. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps. The candle on the shelf flickered wildly, casting shadows across the surface of the water. Shadows that moved against the flow. Mark froze, staring. "Do you see that?" Beneath the murky surface, something shifted. Large. Slow. Emma's knees nearly buckled. "There's something in there." The water was at their shins now, climbing fast, lapping coldly against their skin. From the far corner of the basement came a sound. Not water this time, but a scraping, like nails dragging along the concrete floor. Then silence. Then another ripple. The surface broke. A shape rose briefly before slipping back beneath. Pale. Slender. Not a fish. Not anything Emma had ever seen. She clutched Mark's arm so tightly her nails dug into his skin. "We have to get out." He pounded on the door with both fists, shouting until his voice cracked. But the storm outside swallowed every sound. The water reached their knees. Boxes floated, colliding softly with each other. A child's doll bobbed past, its painted eyes staring up at them. Then, the voice. Soft. Bubbling up from the water itself. "Down here." Emma's blood turned to ice. Mark shook his head violently. "No. That's not possible." The voice came again, gurgling, distorted by liquid. Closer this time. "Come down." Emma sobbed, backing into the wall. The water was waist-high now, chilling her to the bone. Something brushed against her leg. Cold. Slippery. She screamed, thrashing, splashing wildly. Mark grabbed her, pulling her against him. "Stay still. Don't move." But the water moved anyway. Waves surged without reason, as though something massive swam just beneath. The candle guttered, flames stretching, almost snuffed out. In that dim light, they saw it. A face, just beneath the surface, pale and bloated, eyes wide and unblinking. Lips stretched in a grotesque grin, hair drifting like seaweed. Emma shrieked, clawing at the stairwell door. The face vanished with a ripple, replaced by another, then another. More pale faces, surfacing and sinking, circling. "Mark," she sobbed. "There's more." He turned, horror etched across his features. The basement wasn't filling with water. It was filling with them. The surface broke again, and this time, a hand shot up, skeletal and slimy, grabbing the edge of a floating box. Fingers curled over it, dragging it under. Emma's scream echoed in the confined space. The water reached their chests. The candle went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. The only light came from the faint glow of lightning through the basement windows. Each flash revealed nightmare glimpses, heads bobbing, hair floating, mouths opening beneath the waterline. Mark held Emma tightly. "Don't let go," he whispered. Then the water surged violently, knocking them off their feet. Emma went under, icy liquid filling her nose and throat. She kicked wildly, breaking the surface with a gasp. In that instant, something grabbed her ankle. Cold fingers, tightening, pulling. "Mark!" she screamed, clawing at the water. He dove, thrashing, trying to pull her free. But whatever had her was impossibly strong. She felt herself dragged down into the depths of what should have been a shallow basement. Her scream gurgled into silence. Lightning flashed, and Mark saw her face vanish beneath the black. He dove after her, into the freezing abyss. The water swallowed them both. Days later, the storm passed. Neighbors arrived to check on the farmhouse. They found the door unlocked, the house silent. The basement was bone dry. Not a drop of water on the floor, but on the walls, faint streaks remained. As if countless wet hands had pressed there, reaching, clawing, trying to climb their way out. Story 3, The Stranger at the Window. The storm came in hard and sudden. By nightfall, the sky had split wide open, unleashing a torrent of rain that hammered the small country house with relentless force. The thunder was so loud it rattled the window panes, and the lightning lit up the fields like daylight, stark and unnatural before plunging everything back into suffocating darkness. Inside, Claire sat curled in an armchair with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The power had gone out an hour ago, leaving her with only the faint glow of 3 candles on the coffee table. The waxy light barely reached the edges of the room, and every shadow seemed too deep, too heavy. She tried to focus on the book in her lap, but the words blurred. Her eyes kept drifting to the windows, the storm battering against them like fists. She told herself it was fine. She had weathered storms before. She was safe here. Then she heard it. Tap tap, tap tap, tap tap. At first, she thought it was the rain. But the rhythm was wrong. Too deliberate. Too steady. Claire frowned, setting the book aside. She rose slowly, blankets slipping from her shoulders, and crossed the living room. The tapping came from the large window overlooking the porch. She stopped a few feet away, heart hammering. Lightning flashed. Her breath caught in her throat. A face, pale, expressionless, pressed flat against the glass. Eyes wide, lips stretched in an unnatural grin. Claire staggered back with a strangled cry, tripping over the blanket on the floor. By the time she scrambled to her feet, the next bolt of lightning lit up the porch. The face was gone. Her chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. She grabbed the nearest candle, clutching it like a weapon, and edged toward the window again. Rain streaked down the glass in chaotic rivers, obscuring everything beyond. She squinted, searching for movement. Nothing. Maybe she had imagined it. A trick of the storm. Shadows. The mind playing cruel tricks in candlelight. Then it came again. Tap tap. Tap tap. But this time, from the kitchen. Claire froze. The kitchen window was on the opposite side of the house. Her skin crawled as she moved slowly, candle trembling in her hand. She stepped into the narrow kitchen, the dark pressing in close. Lightning split the sky. The face was there again, inches from her, pressed against the glass, grinning. Claire screamed, dropping the candle. Wax splattered across the counter as darkness swallowed the room. She fumbled backward, heart slamming against her ribs, until her back hit the refrigerator. Another flash of lightning lit the window. The face was gone. Claire sank to the floor, clutching her chest. The phone. She needed to call someone. Anyone. She crawled toward the wall where the landline was mounted, snatched up the receiver, and pressed it to her ear. Static. She jiggled the cord, slammed the base, pressed again. Nothing. The storm had taken the phone lines out. Her only hope was her cell phone, charging in the bedroom. She bolted down the hall, almost slipping on the rug. She grabbed the phone from the nightstand, but the screen stayed black. Dead. Thunder shook the walls. Then, tapping. This time, from the bedroom window. Claire turned slowly, dread prickling across her skin. The curtain stirred, lifted faintly by the draft of the storm. Beyond it was only black glass. She forced herself forward, each step leaden. With shaking hands, she pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. Just her reflection in the glass, pale and frightened. She exhaled shakily, pressing her forehead against the cool pane. "You're losing it," she whispered. "It's just the storm." Just, lightning exploded across the sky. And there it was. The face. Not outside, but reflected in the glass behind her. Claire whirled, stumbling backwards so fast she crashed into the dresser. The candle on the nightstand flickered wildly. The room was empty. Her hands shook so violently she dropped the dead cell phone onto the floor. She crouched, scooping it up, clutching it to her chest like a lifeline. Then, in the silence between thunderclaps, she heard something else. Not tapping. Footsteps. Above her. In the attic. Claire's eyes darted upward. The attic hatch was in the hall, just outside her bedroom. She shook her head violently, whispering, "No. No, no, no." The footsteps moved slowly across the ceiling, deliberate, heavy, back and forth. She grabbed the candle again and backed into the hall. Her eyes stayed locked on the hatch above, half expecting it to burst open. Instead, the footsteps stopped. The silence pressed in, unbearable. Then came the tapping again. But this time, it wasn't at one window. It was at all of them. Every room. Every wall. Tap tap. Tap tap. Tap tap. Surrounding her, closing in. Lightning strobed through the house, illuminating fleeting glimpses. A shadow at the living room window. A grin pressed against the kitchen glass. Another face at the back door. Too many. Moving impossibly fast, circling the house like predators. Claire backed into the center of the hall, candle shaking in her hand. The storm raged louder, thunder rolling endlessly. The tapping grew harder, more insistent. Tap tap. Tap tap. Tap tap. She dropped the candle. Her chest heaved, breath ragged. She squeezed her eyes shut. Wake up. Please, wake up. A new sound broke through. The creak of the attic hatch. Claire's eyes snapped open. Slowly, impossibly, the wooden panel shifted. Inch by inch, it lowered. Something was coming down. She bolted, racing toward the front door. Her fingers clawed at the lock, wrenching it open with frantic strength. She threw the door wide and stumbled onto the porch. The storm drenched her instantly, cold water soaking her clothes. Wind howled through the trees, bending them like grass. But she wasn't alone. In the yard, illuminated by lightning, stood a figure. Pale, grinning, still. Claire's scream was lost to the storm. She turned and ran into the rain, bare feet slapping against the mud, not daring to look back. When neighbors checked the house the next morning, they found the front door hanging open, rainwater pooled on the floor. The attic hatch was closed. The windows were streaked with condensation. And on every pane of glass, smeared in long, wet streaks, were the marks of hands. Pressing. Waiting. Story 4, the last bus stop. The rain had been falling for hours, and the city seemed to fold into itself under the weight of it. What little traffic there had been was long gone, the roads slick and shining like black glass. The street lamps buzzed faintly in the storm, their halos of light blurred and trembling in the sheets of water that came down in endless waves. Maya hunched under the narrow roof of the bus stop, arms wrapped tight around herself. Her backpack sagged heavily against her shoulder, soaked through at the edges despite her attempts to shield it. She shifted on the cold metal bench, legs bouncing with restless energy. The night felt wrong, empty in a way the city rarely was. Her phone screen glowed faintly in her hand, the signal bar flickering uselessly. No service. The storm had taken that too. The bus schedule app was frozen, and she had no way of knowing when, or if, the next ride would come. She sighed and pushed the phone back into her pocket, dragging her hood lower over her face. The storm pressed closer in the silence. Her watch read 11:47. She had been waiting nearly an hour. And still, nothing. Then, headlights. They cut through the rain like a blade, a pair of glowing eyes emerging from the downpour. Maya scrambled to her feet, relief surging. She stepped forward as the hulking bus rumbled into view, tires hissing on the flooded street. It slowed, brakes whining faintly, and pulled up in front of her. The doors opened with a muted hiss. Inside, the bus was dim. Maya climbed aboard, the driver giving her only the briefest glance. His face was shadowed by the brim of his cap, his hands pale and stiff on the wheel. She swiped her transit card across the reader, though she wasn't sure it even beeped, and made her way down the aisle. Only a few passengers sat scattered across the seats. All of them were soaked, clothes clinging to their bodies, hair plastered flat against their faces. They stared straight ahead, unmoving. Not one turned to look at her. Maya hesitated, her sneakers squeaking on the wet floor, then slid into a seat near the middle. She set her backpack at her feet, hugging herself for warmth. The bus lurched back into motion. She tried not to look at the passengers, but her eyes betrayed her. The woman too rose ahead, with a damp floral dress and stringy hair, sat with her hands clasped in her lap, unmoving. Beside her, a man in a business suit leaned against the window, his eyes wide open, staring blankly. Across the aisle, a child no older than 7 sat stiff-backed, water dripping from his chin. None of them blinked. Maya rubbed her arms, glancing out the rain-streaked window. The city rolled past, blurred and indistinct, every street as empty as the last. She tried to tell herself it was fine. They were just tired. Just cold. Who wouldn't sit in silence on a night like this? But something in her gut twisted. The silence was wrong. No one coughed. No one sniffled. No one shifted in their seat. And the bus itself was too quiet. The engine hummed faintly, but there was no rattle of metal, no hiss of brakes, no screech of tires on wet pavement. Just the endless rhythm of rain against glass. Maya licked her lips nervously, her breath fogging the window. She leaned her forehead against the glass, trying to ground herself in the storm outside. Lightning split the sky. Her heart stopped. For a brief, blinding moment, the entire bus was illuminated. Every passenger's reflection stared back at her from the glass. Pale faces. Blank eyes. All of them visible. Except hers. Where her reflection should have been, nothing. Maya jerked back from the window with a gasp. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She rubbed at the glass with her sleeve, as if she could scrub her reflection into existence. The next lightning flash came. Still nothing. The bus rolled on, silent but for the storm. Maya pressed her hands to her face, whispering, "No, no, no." A sound broke the silence. A wet, dragging noise. Slowly, she lowered her hands. The passengers were turning. One by one, their heads shifted in her direction, movements stiff, unnatural. Eyes unblinking, mouths closed. The man in the suit twisted his neck too far, the crack audible even over the storm. The child's head lolled sideways, chin dripping rainwater onto the seat. They stared at her. All of them. Maya bolted from her seat, stumbling down the aisle toward the driver. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "Stop the bus. Please stop." The driver didn't move. His pale hands remained fixed on the wheel, stiff as bone. His cap shadowed his face completely. Maya grabbed his shoulder and shook hard. "Did you hear me? Stop." His head turned slowly. The cap slid back. His face was gray, waxy, water dripping from hollow sockets where eyes should have been. His mouth opened with a sickening crack, and from the darkness inside came a sound not human at all, like rushing water, endless and deep. Maya staggered back, slipping on the wet floor. She fell hard against the steps by the door. The passengers were rising now, standing in unison, dripping, silent. She slammed her hand against the door controls. Nothing. She tried again, pounding frantically. Still nothing. Her chest heaved, panic clawing at her lungs. She turned back toward the aisle and froze. They were closer. Not moving. Not walking. Just closer. Another flash of lightning lit the bus. They were right in front of her. The child's face pressed near hers, water dripping from wide, empty eyes. The woman in the floral dress reached for her with hands that dripped mud and rain. The man's jaw hung loose, unhinged, skin sagging unnaturally. Maya screamed. The bus plunged into darkness. She felt cold hands grip her arms, her shoulders, her throat. Pulling. Dragging. Her scream cut off as icy water surged into her lungs, choking her, suffocating. The world tilted, collapsed. And then, silence. The storm raged on outside, the bus rolling steadily through the empty streets. At the next stop, the doors hissed open. Rain splashed on the pavement. No one got off. But in the seat near the middle, dripping wet, eyes fixed straight ahead, a new passenger sat utterly still. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. And her reflection was there, at last, staring blankly from the window.